All right, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. This is our monthly new partner introduction. So this is something we've put together for you. We present every month. For those of you that have recently joined Zyxel as a reseller, or maybe you're a new employee at someone that's been a reseller for a while, or maybe you just want a little to touch base here and get sort of a little update on what's going on. So the presentation will take about an hour, and we'll do sort of a high level overview of some of the different product lines, give you some tips on the naming rules, things like that to sort of help you out and get you started here with Zyxel as a partner. As we go through today, questions can be sent in using the question and answer part of the Zoom interface. So just look for where it says Q&A and use that to send in any questions that you have. So we'll start with just a little bit of background on who Zyxel is. Zyxel's been making computer networking products since 1989, so over 30 years of making computer networking products. So we've been doing this a while. Um, Globally, we have over 700 employees. We operate in 150 different global markets, and we've deployed over 100 million devices out there in the field. Now, I know for some of you that are new, you're going to say, well, how is that possible? I've never heard of you until just recently. And the fact of the matter is, Zyxel is a global company. Our headquarters is in Taiwan. We have offices spread throughout the world, but the bulk of our business is done in Europe. The North American side of things has been primarily focused on the service provider side, specifically large ISPs, such as CenturyLink, Verizon, those type of guys. And we've never really made as large of a push into the computer networking space here in North America that we did in Europe, where they sort of jumped, feet first into it. And in the US, we were kind of slow to get into the networking side of the business. So that's why you haven't heard of us, even though we've been around for a while. Just some other fun stuff here globally. When it comes to sub $500 network security appliances, we're number one in market share. In Europe, we're number two in market share when it comes to business class wireless access points, and number five when it comes to SMB switching. So before we get started talking about the hardware, I do want to remind you that you're here today probably because you are a partner. You have joined our partner program. So just to touch on a couple things here really quick about the partner program. To begin with, as a partner, you automatically get discounts at our distribution partners. So be sure if you sign up with a new distribution partner that you let your salesperson know that you have and give them your account number so we can get those discounts loaded for you. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to see those discounts. And as a partner, you get priority access to our tech support team. You get access to our sales engineer. And the big one here for you is you get access to deal registration. So if you're working on a project or a bid that you're bringing in, contact us, sign up the form for deal registration so we can lock that in for you and know that you're the one who brought this in. You're the one working on it first. So later on, if your customer goes out there and starts shopping around for prices, we make sure you're getting the best deal and not somebody else. If you don't do that deal reg, we don't know it's been registered. Someone else may register it out from underneath you. We also have trade-in programs, so be sure to take advantage of those to be able to get some big discounts on some of our hardware when you're trading in and upgrading either competitors' hardware or some of our older hardware. So we're going to start talking about Zyxel Nebula, and the reason we're talking about Nebula first, and the reason why we're going to spend as much time as we do talking about it, is because Nebula is sort of something that touches all of our main product lines. Nebula is there for our security gateways, it's there for our switches, it's there for our access points. So it's sort of something that sort of ties them all together and touches each one of them. So we do want to talk about it a little bit here. So for those of you that are new, Nebula is Zyxel's cloud managed networking platform. So we were the first to launch a cloud-based management platform that was specifically aimed at the SMB. We launched this all the way back in 2016. So we've been doing it for 7 years now. So the solution itself has been around for a while. It's very stable. It's very feature rich. Now, at the time when we launched, pretty much the only players in this space were specifically targeting the enterprise space, with Meraki being the king of the enterprise space. But no one was going after the SMB. So we wanted to create a Meraki-like solution that was specifically aimed at the SMB space, where we saw a lot of potential to help you guys out, to simplify setting up new networks, managing your customers, things like that. If you're not already doing MSP type business, providing proactive monitoring and solutions, Nebula is a great way to get your foot in the door for that. So just a quick overview of what Nebula is. It provides unified and centralized control and visibility. Basically, you just go to nebula.zyxel.com, you log in. That's where you configure all of your products. That's where you set up your customers' networks. It doesn't matter whether you're talking access points, switches, or security gateways, you log in there and it's all right there for you. Now, Nebula doesn't require you purchase or install any additional software. There's no servers that need to be set up. There's no cloud keys. There is nothing like that. The agent is built into the Nebula compatible hardware itself, so there's nothing else you need. And we offer zero touch provisioning. In the majority of our installs, there is no reason to configure the device locally. You simply go to the cloud, configure it, plug it in, and once it's been plugged in and has an internet connection and power, it will reach out to the cloud, see that you want to manage it in the cloud, and automatically put itself into cloud mode for you. You don't have to point it at a server or manually go in and tell it it needs to go out to the cloud. The only time you would need to touch the hardware and configure the hardware directly is if you're using your network requires you configure fixed IPs in advance. Then you will need to log into the GUIs, add them their fixed IP, and then everything else would be done in the cloud. Our suggestion is always going to be, temporarily enable DHCP on the network for the initial install, configure the fixed IP addresses in Nebula, and then turn off DHCP on that network. That's the easiest way to do it, to minimize how many devices you have to touch. And then a key thing here with Nebula is free. We are the only cloud management platform out there that is free currently that I'm aware of. Everything else is going to require that you pay a fee to be able to manage your devices. So the free version of Nebula allows you to manage an unlimited number of devices, an unlimited number of customers, an unlimited number of sites. We do offer some additional licenses, which unlock additional features for you that you can purchase. All of those are very affordable, and we will talk a little bit about them later. So let's talk about some of the key things here with Nebula. So it's designed to get your network up and running quickly. When you go to create a network, we've got a number of wizard steps here that we walk you through, which will get your network up and operating in just a few minutes. Obviously, you may need to spend a lot more time, particularly at your firewall, setting up access rules and things like that. But in general, we'll have you up and running with a working router, access point, switch, with just a couple minutes of going through our little thing there. You can start pre-configuring your devices before you take them out of the box. So right now, today, while I'm talking, you can log into Nebula, create your account, start setting up one of your customers and their sites, and many of the configuration options there for you are going to be available before you've assigned any hardware to that customer. Once you do get some hardware on hand, you simply use our mobile app, scan the QR code on the outside of the box of the hardware, assign it to your customer site, and then you can go in and complete your configuration long before you ship that hardware to your customer's actual site. So Nebula Control Center is the heart of Nebula. That is the cloud portion that you go to and access at nebula.zyxel.com. And that's going to give you, that's where your unified and centralized control is. It handles the zero touch provisioning. It's got built-in default multi-site management out of the box. And basically the way our zero touch provisioning works is there should be no extra configuration you need to do on the firewall in most situations. There's nothing, no ports to be forwarded, nothing like that. As long as you're allowing devices on your network to reach out to the internet, you should be fine. If you've got one of those tightly locked down networks, we do provide a list of port ranges and IP addresses that need to be opened up for our devices to reach out, to register with the cloud and talk to it. There's nothing that needs to be opened up, though, to allow unrequested traffic directly into those devices. So this is what you see when you log into one of your customer site. We've got this nice little dashboard there for you with a bunch of widgets on it. Those widgets are customizable, so you can choose which widgets you want to see. But just in general, it'll show you things like how many devices are currently online, any wireless users that are out there, your PoE utilization versus your switch PoE budget. If you're using one of our security gateways, we can even tell you which applications are using up the most of your bandwidth on the site. All monitoring and configuration is done on these menus here along the left-hand side of the page. And then if you want to jump between customers, you simply use this pull-down menu on the top. It will show you a list of your customers, choose the customer you want to manage, and then it'll update this pull down on the right with the list of sites that that customer has. Choose the site and it'll automatically jump you over to the dashboard for that customer and site. So again, just to hit on this here, there's no additional hardware or software required to use Nebula. You just simply buy Nebula compatible Zyxel hardware. And then anywhere you have access to a web browser and internet, you have access to your customers and their networks. Some additional features you'll find in Nebula is we have built-in guest access, both wireless and wired. So it is built into our access points themselves. So even if you're not using a Zyxel gateway, you can still provide guest access just through the access points themselves. They can do the captive portal. They can do the client isolation, even without VLANs, to separate your wireless guests from your local network. That's all built in on the access point itself. With the captive portal, it's pretty easy to configure and update how you want. We do give you the ability to be able to take some CSS code and some other code and integrate it into your own website if you'd like to create your own hosted website for doing that captive portal. Otherwise, use what we've got built in. And we give you the flexibility to have people just agree to a terms of service page, have them log in with a username and password you provide, have them register their own account to be able to log in, use Facebook to log in. So a lot of flexibility when it comes to providing guest access, whether we're talking about like a public hotspot, like at a restaurant or a bar or something like that, or whether we're talking about letting vendors or visiting people at your office to be able to log into a local network. On the wireless side of things, we support smart mesh. So you can be able to add access points that don't have an Ethernet connection and they'll automatically mesh to get back. We've also got a sort of an emergency mesh option you can enable. So if somebody unplugs or disconnects the data connection for one of your APs, they can automatically put themselves into mesh mode. We, of course, support WPA2 and 3 enterprise security using Radius authentication, and we support all the industry standards of 11R, K, and V to be able to handle quick roaming for VoIP applications, warehouse applications, etc. So on the switch side of things, we have what we call intelligent PoE. We'll talk a little bit more here when I talk about switches, but basically it allows us to free up additional PoE budget to allow you to put more devices on the same PoE switch versus what you could do if you were using the industry standard way of doing PoE. It's an option you can use. Our switches have built-in, ACL rules, VLAN configuration, 802.1x authentication, loop guard, DHCP server guard to prevent somebody from sticking a DHCP server of their own onto your network and messing things up, and the availability to virtually switch stack. All updates, including firmware updates, are done over the air. There's no reason to go on site or need direct access to the site to be able to make configuration or firmware updates. And on the security gateway side of things, we have our Easy VPN. So that makes it really easy to do site-to-site VPNs. You just choose the sites you want to connect together, choose the topology you want to use, and we'll handle everything else. We also have the ability to generate scripts that you can email to your users to connect their existing devices using L2TP. That's built in on most mobile devices to have that automatically configured to connect back to your office through VPN. That works for Windows, Mac OS, and iOS devices. So Nebula was designed from the ground up to be able to manage multiple customers. So everything's organized in such a way to make it super easy for you to handle lots of different customers. And then we've got our mobile app. So now the mobile app itself is not where you do configuration. The bulk of your configuration you're going to want to do through the web browser. The mobile app is there to give you a quick view of what's going on in your customers' networks. And it's also the tool you'll give to your installers. It will allow them to scan those QR codes to assign the devices to customers. But it will also allow you to take photographs of where you've installed hardware, so that can be stored in the cloud. So if you have to send somebody on site in the future, it's a little tool to make it easier for them to find maybe where the hardware is that they need to do. Excuse me. So just to summarize here, setting up Nebula is as simple as this here. Um, Go into Nebula, set up your customer, start setting up your sites, scan the hardware, add it to that customer site, connect the hardware so it's got power and an internet connection, and then you're done. Everything is there for you in the cloud to handle. And just to reiterate here, Nebula is free. Everything I've talked about up to this point is included as part of the free Nebula solution. So some questions we often get about Nebula here for you real quick. Does the whole network need to be Nebula? No, you don't have to tear out everything that's there and replace it with Nebula equipment. Nebula will manage our Nebula compatible hardware you have installed. Any other hardware that's on the network, you would continue to manage it just as you would just as you would before you've added Nebula hardware on there. So usually direct management for those devices. So no, you don't have to do the whole network in Nebula. You can just do the switches. You can just do the APs. You can just upgrade some pieces. No problem there. Do I need the Zyxel gateway to do captive portal and guest access? So no. Guest access is built into the APs themselves. The APs can do layer 2 isolation, even on non-VLAN compatible networks, to isolate those guest users from the rest of the local network. We have the ability to do NAT on a per SSID basis. So you can put those users that are on the guest network on their own completely different IP block. And of course, also we host the captive portal page in the APs themselves. We get a lot of questions here about privacy, specifically when it comes to things like HIPAA, PCI, GDRP, etc. So yes, you can use Nebula equipment in solutions that are HIPAA, PCI, or GDPR compliant. You absolutely can use our stuff. The only thing that's touching our cloud is the log information coming from our hardware, the configuration information, and the firmware. None of your customers' traffic, none of your customers' personal identification, none of that stuff is going through our network. LAN traffic stays on the LAN. Traffic that's going out to the WAN goes directly out to the WAN. And then we also get questions, who hosts your cloud? So our Nebula cloud is hosted using Amazon AWS. They're obviously one of the biggest names when it comes to cloud hosted solutions. Lots of major websites use them, and that includes us. We are distributed globally through different AWS nodes. So you've always got a node close to you where your network has been deployed. So when buying hardware from Zyxel, you will often see the term Nebula Flex. So what Nebula Flex means for you is that's hardware that can be used with the Nebula Cloud, but it doesn't have to be used with the Nebula Cloud. You can use it with traditional management as well. So you've got the flexibility to use Nebula or not based on what you're doing. It gives you the ability to standardize on certain models and be able to use them whether or not for that particular customer you're using the cloud or not to provide management. You will also see some hardware out there called Nebula Flex Pro. And for most hardware, Nebula Flex Pro just means we've bundled 1 year of our Nebula Pro Pack, which is an optional license for Nebula. We've bundled that with the hardware. In the case of access points, it also unlocks the ability with Nebula Flex Pro to be able to use those access points with a local controller. So if you don't want to use the cloud, but you've got a bunch of access points and you want to manage them with a local controller, you would want to buy hardware that's Nebula Flex Pro, even though you are not using Nebula for it. And basically switching between traditional management and Nebula management is very easy. You simply add the hardware to your customer's organization and site in the Nebula interface, and within a few minutes, that hardware will automatically reboot and put itself into cloud mode. If at any point down the line you want to remove that hardware and put it back in traditional management mode, all you do is log into the Nebula interface, unregister the hardware, and it'll automatically reboot itself and go back to a stock default configuration for standard configuration and management. Now, I did mention we do have some optional licenses for you, so I just want to touch on those real quick here. Nebula Base Pack is what we call the free version of Nebula, and that's the default state of most devices. We have a very inexpensive license. I think it's somewhere in the ballpark of $12, $13 per device per year, that called Plus Pack, which is designed to compete with cloud solutions similar that are offered by, like TP-Link's Omada or Netgear. And it unlocks some additional features for you. It gives you more cloud storage for logs, more cloud storage for our cloud hosted authentication server, more admin accounts per customer that you're managing, push alerts, email alerts, things like that. So that's an upgrade option for you. And then we have the Nebula Pro Pack, which is our main or most popular solution that we offer. It's in the ballpark of around $30, $35 per device per year to unlock these additional features. And those are mainly aimed at MSP type solutions, unlocking our artificial intelligence for IPTV and wireless management, and some additional things like that. If you Google around, you can find a list online of all the differences between the three versions. You can reach out to your salesperson, they can provide you that as well. So in order to use Plus and Pro Pack, it's done on a per customer basis. So every device that that one customer has will need to have a Plus license to unlock Plus features, or the Pro license to unlock Pro features. If you don't have a license for each device, your organization will stay in the free version of Nebula until you do. And should licenses expire, they simply fall back to the free version of Nebula. You never get locked out of your hardware. We also have what's called the Nebula MSP pack, which is a license for admin users. So this unlocks additional features for that admin account on every site that that admin has access to. So just to quickly show here, basically when you're looking at our hardware here, our NWA series access points are Nebula Flex. On the switches are 1900 series, so 1950, 1920, 1930. Those are Nebula Flex. Our SCR50AXE, our new sort of lightweight security router, that's Nebula Flex. If you're buying our USG Flex series security gateways and you buy the version which does not come bundled with any UTM services, those are Nebula Flex. And then for Nebula Flex Pro, on our access points, it's any access point that starts with WAC or WAX, or basically just starts with W. Woo, that was loud. On the switch side of things, the Pro versions here for you that include that 1-year license are going to be the 1350 series switches, the 2220 series switches, and the 3800 series switches. And then when it comes to our security gateways, the ATP series are going to be Nebula Flex Pro, and the USG series that include the UTM licenses out of the box will also include 1 year of Nebula Flex Pro. And then our 4G outdoor router, the LTE 7461N, that includes 1 year of Nebula Pro with it. Okay, so that's it for Nebula. Now let's start talking about the hardware. So we'll start by talking about our wireless products. And basically, we can break up our products into 3 different categories. We have what we're calling here the Simplicity series. And these are more of our sort of consumer SOHO type access points. They're Wi-Fi 6 Lite products. They're missing some features like they don't support 802.1x authentication. Like the 50 series doesn't support captive portal. They don't support load balancing across APs, etc. So those are our 50 and 90 series products. And then we've got what I would consider our entry level true business class APs, and that's the NWA series. That's 3 digits. So that's the 110 and 210 series, and in the older models, the NWA 1123 AC series. From this point onward, all of these access points include a lifetime warranty. All of them use our sort of heavy duty design philosophy to make these last and perform better. And they include the full Wi-Fi 6 feature set. They include the full Nebula feature set. And then we've got our Ultimate series here. So these are the models that start with the letter W. These are probably our most popular access points when it comes to the SMB space. And these are models here that not only do they include the 1-year Nebula Pro Pack, these models here also often include our sort of advanced antenna technology, our smart antenna, our dual optimized antennas, etc. So basically anything from those right to most series of products here are basically built this way here, even our sub $100 access points there. And basically it's a design philosophy. It's basically designing our access points to last. So if you've been at a trade show, sometimes will have our APs on display. We will sometimes also have a Ruckus or Ubiquiti or Netgear model there with us. And we'll let you handle them both. And you will see our access point weighs a lot more. And that has to do with what we've done to sort of prolong the life of our hardware. So these are solid state components. So one of the most common causes of failure over time with solid state components is heat fatigue. Basically, the solder joints can fail, or the little micro switches that are inside your computer chips, those can fail. So to deal with that, all of our access points have a large number of vents on the back of the access point, normally where it be the top side of it when you've got it mounted, for the heat to escape. If you look at some of our competitors, they don't have any vent holes on them. The next thing we do, and this leads to some of the weight issues you will see even when comparing us to more expensive access points, is we've got a large metal plate behind the main PCBA that's designed basically as a heat sink to pull heat off of the board and vent it out the back so we don't get the heat buildup in the components themselves. Another common cause of failure over time with solid state components is capacitor failure. Primarily, electrolytic capacitors tend to be prone to failure after a year or two. So on all of our NWA 100 series and higher and W series access points, we use only solid state capacitors. There are no electrolytic capacitors which can dry out or leak or boil over. And then when it comes to the actual wireless performance, you will notice on our boards that we have a lot more shielding on the PCBA. So what we have is, in addition to your traditional Wi-Fi shielding, we also add additional shielding for 4G and 5G. So a lot of 4G, 5G signals are bordering 2.4 or 5 gigahertz and may bleed over and cause interference when the signal from the 3G or 4G antenna is close to the access point. Not a problem in your typical home, not a problem in some smaller offices, but in larger office buildings, they use solutions that they call DAS, which distributes 4G or 5G signals inside the building. So you have a good solid signal even when you're indoors inside the building. And so when you do that, you've got little antennas or basically LTE access points distributed throughout the building, so they can be very close to your wireless access points and cause interference. So that extra shielding we built in helps solves that. Another difference that we do is on most of our access points, we do not mount our antennas directly onto the PCBA. Even, expensive Ruckus access points tend to have the antennas mounted onto the PCBA. Instead, we mount them onto their own board, and we usually include a metal shield between the main board and the antenna board to provide better RF isolation for those antennas. So now when I was talking about the W series, I mentioned dual antenna or dual optimized antenna and smart antenna. So I want to cover that real quick. I believe we are the only vendor out there offering dual optimized antennas. So basically, your traditional access point has one set of antennas, and they've been optimized with the idea that you're going to mount them on the ceiling directly over the area where coverage needs to be provided. Unfortunately, out here in the real world, you don't always get the choice of mounting them on the ceiling. Sometimes you end up having to mount them on the wall. And now your antenna pattern is not optimized for the placement. It ends up sending a lot of that signal up into the ceiling, down into the floor. So our solution for this is the dual optimized antennas. And basically, instead of giving you one fixed antenna, we give you two different sets of antennas. One that's optimized for ceiling, one that's optimized for wall placement. And you can simply decide on a per AP basis which set of antennas to use based on where you've installed them. So when you're looking at our access point model numbers, if the end in the letter D or the letters D-I, that's telling you that that access point offers dual optimized antennas. So an example of this would be our WAX610D. That D at the end means dual optimized. We also offer smart antenna technology. So if you've familiar with Ruckus and their BeamFlex, our smart antenna is very similar to their BeamFlex. Unfortunately, we're using the generic term smart antenna, and there's some other vendors out there that use smart antenna for different type solutions. So that's why I want to specifically point out our smart antenna implementation is very similar to BeamFlex if you are familiar with that. And so basically it's the same idea. You've got, traditionally one fixed antenna pattern. With smart antenna, we have the ability to use hundreds of antenna patterns in the access point, and we can optimize and choose the best antenna pattern for each individual client connecting to that access point. It does not require anything special on the client device in order for this to work. Now, the question we often get is, isn't this just beamforming? And no, this is not your standard beamforming. This works with mobile clients where beamforming requires clients be stationary, and it's a completely different technology because we've got literally hundreds of different combinations of antennas that we can use to create this signal, where with beamforming, you're just using 2 or 3 antennas and then alternating the timing and the power to try to shape the beam. So it's a very different solution that looks kind of similar when you draw it out. Now, our algorithm that we use not only optimizes the antenna pattern based on where the client device is in relationship to the access point, but it also looks at other sources of interference. That could be other access points operating on this overlapping channels. It can also be industrial equipment, kitchen equipment, in this case, a microwave, which puts out interference on 2.4 gigahertz. And we can choose an antenna pattern that not only optimizes signal to the client, but optimizes our listening antenna pattern to ignore sources of RF interference. So a number of years ago, the University of Brescia in Italy, their computer and networking group got together. They saw the claims that us and Ruckus make in terms of smart antenna, and they decided to test it. And this is the results they came up with. If you Google, Zyxel smart antenna white paper, we have a white paper that goes into more in depth that you can print out and give to your customers that explains some of their findings. You can also find the link to the networking group's white paper and view every test they did, every result they came up with, stuff like that. But just in general, they compared us and Ruckus to Aruba and Meraki. So compared to HP Aruba, they found that smart antenna can provide up to 70% better performance in a true real world environment where there are sources of interference. Comparing us to Cisco, which doesn't have smart antenna, but they've got their own sort of technology to try to deal with interference issues, we had up to a 56% better performance. And even comparing our smart antenna implementation to Ruckus's smart antenna implementation, specifically dealing with co-channel interference issues, up to 45% better. Now, our access points also have something that's kind of interesting, is many of them have the ability to add a connect and protect license onto them. So this is a way of providing a lightweight UTM solution at the access point level for your wireless clients. So why would you want something like that? Why would you want UTM on your access point when you could do it on the gateway, the traditional way of doing it? And the answer to that is basically, a lot of times you're upgrading your customer's existing network. That router or security gateway that they've got at the WAN connection is something that was provided by their ISP. Maybe it doesn't offer UTM services. Maybe it requires an expensive license to do it, but you can't add the license even if you wanted to because it's managed by the ISP, where your customer doesn't know how to log into it, et cetera, et cetera. So this is a way to be able to provide UTM-like services to your wireless customers. It also allows you to pick and choose which access points provide this level of security. Maybe you don't need it out in the warehouse. Maybe you only need it in the main office. So you can just add it to the access points that you want to be able to add this functionality to. And just to give you guys a head up, right now on our NWA 110AX, if you buy the NWA 110AX-CNPP, that price has been reduced. So now it is the same price as the regular non-CNP bundled AP. And we've added 2 additional years of Connect and Protect to it. So now when you buy that AP, you get 3 years of Connect and Protect. You also get bundled with it 3 years of Nebula Plus. So that's a promotion that just started this week, just to let you be aware of it. So again, it's on the NWA 110AX-CNPP. CNPP being Connect and Protect Plus bundle. So that's it for wireless. We'll talk about our switches here. So the first thing I'm going to say is we've got a lot of switches. You can see here, these are our switches grouped together based on model numbering. So when you're talking about our switches and you're trying to figure out which of our switches you need or want, you can tell a lot about the switch by looking at the model number. So one of the first things you'll see is we'll have two letters, generally 2 or 3 letters prefixing it. Then we'll have a number, 1915, 1920, 19 whatever. That's that 19 number or the 12 number or whatever that number is telling you what series it is. And so we'll come back to that here in just a second. So just in general, when you look at those prefixes, that will tell you the speed ports that are on those switches. So if you see a switch that starts with the letter ES, that's telling you all ports on that switch are 10100. If the switch model name starts with GS, that's telling you all ports on that switch are gigabit ports. If you see MG, that's telling you that that is a multi-gig switch. So all ports on that switch will be multi-gig. Multi-gig meaning anything from 2.5 gig or faster ports, just depending on the model of switch. If you see the letters XS, that's telling you that that is a 10 gig switch and all ports on that switch are 10 gig. If you see XGS, that's telling you that most of the ports on that switch are a 1 gig port, but it does have 10 gig uplinks, usually 4 of them. So XGS, when you need 1 gig for your users, but you need some 10 gig uplinks, that's the model series you want. And then XMG series is telling you you've got a mix of multi-gig ports and 10 gig ports on the switch. And then when you look at the end of the switch model name, right? So we've got the prefix, we'll then have the series number. There will then be a dash telling you approximately how many ports are there. And then there will be a couple of letters possibly on the end. So those letters are telling you usually about PoE. HP switches are providing either 80, or excuse me, are providing either PoE plus or PoE plus plus power. So either 30 watts or 60 watts of power per port. EP are switches that provide usually PoE plus power, but the overall power budget is reduced to lower cost. And then if you see FP on the end, again, you're looking at a switch that's usually providing PoE plus or PoE plus plus, but it's got a much bigger than normal PoE overall PoE power budget. So if you're looking to power a bunch of 60 watt pan tilt zoom cameras, FP is what you're probably looking for. And then if you see just F all by itself at the end there, that is telling you that that is a fiber switch and all of the ports on that switch are probably SFP ports. So when we look at the models here, in general, as the model series goes up, the feature set goes up as well. So down here sort of towards the bottom is the 100 and 1000 and 11,000 series. Those are going to be your unmanaged switches. Going up to the 1200 series are our lightweight web managed switches. So these are more of a Soho type switch that provides some basic VLAN settings and maybe some basic QoS settings in them. And then for most of you, for most applications, you're probably looking at the 1900 series and higher. So with the 1900 series and higher is where you start getting into rack mount switches. The 1200 series are desktop only, although there are desktop versions of the 1900s here. And they provide you a smart managed solution that provides a lot of layer 2 types features. And then everything pretty much 1915 series and higher is Nebula managed. So if you're looking for a lightweight switch with some layer 2 features, but you do want Nebula management, the 1915 series is for you. Our most popular layer 2 or layer 2 plus switches are going to be the 1920 V2 and the 1930 series switches. The primary difference being the 1920 series are GS switches, where the 1930 series are going to be XS or XGS switches. So just again, the GS meaning that all ports are 1 gig, XS meaning all ports are 10 gig, or XGS meaning you've got a mix of 1 and 10 gig ports on them. These are probably our two best-selling series of switches. For those of you that are old school, you want a full layer 2 plus switch, you want a command line interface. Our GS2220 series and the XGS2220 series is what you are looking at there. And then on the layer 3 side of things here, we have our 3800 series and 4600 series of switches. We've also got these guys down here, the 1350 series, which don't really fit in on the normal chart of as you go up in number, the features get more and more. So the 1350 series of switches offers a command line interface. These are our security switches. These are switches that were designed specifically for those of you that do a lot of IP security cameras, and they add some extra features that you don't find on our other switches. They add the ability for you to provide power and data connections up to 300 meters instead of the standard 100 meters that's normally available on a PoE switch. They have the ability to monitor connected devices and automatically power cycle devices that are connected to them should those devices stop responding. They have the ability in there, so if the switch itself needs to reboot, it will continue to provide PoE power during the reboot, so the connected devices don't have to reboot themselves when that switch happens. So that's its own little series there that's got some cool features in it that you may be interested in that doesn't really fit in with the rest as far as naming goes. So just to hit here some highlights of our different switch series here. Those switches that are Nebula Flex can be used in cloud managed or standalone mode. So that's basically everything 1915 series up to the 3800 series switches. We offer unmanaged switches, smart managed switches, web managed switches, CLI, et cetera, comprehensive PoE offerings, layer 2 and layer 3 management solutions for you. And I believe everything 1915 series and higher uses Zynos. So Zynos is our own sort of operating system that we maintain. I believe it is Linux based. I won't swear to that though. But what this means for you is that basically all of our switches 1915 series and higher are going to have roughly the same interface and the same implementation of features when they have the same features. So everything is consistent between the different models, which is different from some of our lower end competition, where they're generally using whichever operating system SDK was provided by the chipset vendor. So as you go between different model series, you will often find very different GUIs, different namings, different implementations of similar features. So with Zynos, the 1915 and higher, you've got a sort of unified, consistent interface and implementation. And then our switches are built to last, similar to our access points, high quality power supplies, solid state capacitors, power noise filters, the fans are heavy duty, etc. So I want to take a couple of seconds here, talk about PoE. As I mentioned earlier, we have an intelligent or smart PoE implementation. So I want to talk about that briefly here because that is different than some of the other vendors that are out there. So traditionally, the way PoE works is you've got basically three standards. You have your standard PoE 802.3 AF, which provides up to 15.4 watts of power per plugged in device. We have PoE Plus 802.3 AT, and that provides up to 30 watts of power coming out of those ports. And then you have PoE++, which is the newest version of PoE, which can provide 60 watts of power per port. And so what happens is when you plug a PoE device into a PoE capable switch, they'll do a quick little handshake where the connected device will identify itself based on class. And that class tells the switch how much power to reserve for that device out of that switch's PoE budget. So for standard PoE 802.3 AF, you had three different classes that those devices can identify. So you've got three different levels of PoE budget that will be reserved based on what they identify themselves as. Unfortunately, PoE Plus only has one additional class. So if a device is using PoE Plus, whether it's using 16 watts of power or 30 watts of power, it is a class 4 device. And so your switch will always reserve 30 watts of power for that connected device. And then PoE++ has got two different levels there for you, 5 and 6. So you've only got two splits for those extra 30 watts of power above the first 30 watts of power. So because of that, you end up in a situation where um, you end up using a lot more PoE power budget than you need to. So we've got this example here. It is a IP phone. It's got a class 3 device. So using the official way of doing PoE, it will reserve 15.4 watts of power for each AP you plug into your switch. However, in this example here, this phone actually only draws 9 watts of power. So we have the ability to use this intelligent PoE and ignore the class and instead use consumption mode where the switch will look at what the PoE draw is on that device, in this case 9 watts, and then free up the additional 6 watts of power that would normally be reserved for it so you could use it for other devices. So in this case here, if we plug in 24 of these IP phones, you would need a switch with 370 watt PoE power budget to power up all 24. We're using our consumption mode. You only need 216 watts of PoE power budget to power up the same 24 phones. So it can allow you, basically this intelligent PoE that we offer allows you to plug in a lot more devices on the same switch with that same PoE budget. Now I'll quickly go through some of the different model lines in a little bit more detail, keyword being little here. We do have standalone PoE power injectors for you. Both of our PoE power injectors are multi-gig. So we have a 30 watt PoE power injector that has 2.5 meg multi-gig ports on it. And then we have a 60 watt PoE injector for the bigger APs and for those bigger IP cameras. And that has a 5 gig multi-gig port in it. On the switch side of things, like I was talking about earlier, we have these dedicated security switches here, the GS1350 series here, which give you that extended range, excuse me, up to, I think I said earlier, 300 meters. I was wrong, 250 meters for power and data. It's slower data, but it is still data, and it requires nothing special on those PoE powered devices to be able to use it. Continuous PoE when it's rebooting, the ability to automatically recover devices when they stop responding, etc. So it's a nice series of switches there for you if you're doing those IP cameras, and maybe some of those features like automatically rebooting things or the extra long runs may be useful in non-IP camera scenarios. Our 1915 series here is our sort of entry level Nebula layer 2 switch for you. So if you're not using Nebula, it's a smart managed switch with the basic feature set in there. And we have two versions here. We got a 1915-8 EP. So that's providing up to 60 watts of PoE power budget. And then we've got a 24 port, which provides 130 watts of power budget. The next step up here is going to be our 1920 and 1930 series. So I just wanted to talk briefly about the 1930 series. We have the XS series here. So these are going to be all 10 gig ports on them for you here. And depending on the switch, basically you'll get a bunch of copper ports, and then you'll get a couple of fiber uplink ports. Or in the case here of our 1930-12F, it's basically 10 fiber ports, then you've got 2 copper uplink ports for legacy connections. The XMG, which is a new model that came out recently here. So this is an XMG 1930 series. So you're getting a mix here of multi-gig ports. You're getting 24 copper 2.5 gig ports, and then you're getting 4 uplink ports, which are either copper or fiber, providing speeds up to 10 gigabits. And then our 2220 series, are our true layer 2 plus switches here for you. For those of you that are old school and like your command line interfaces, this is the series for you. And then just to hit here really quick for multi-gig, if you're looking for a lightweight multi-gig solution, we have several different models currently available here. These are all desktop-based sort of home or prosumer switches, but they do offer multi-gig ports. The MG 105 and 108 provide either 5 or 8 ports of 2.5 gig copper. We've got our XGS 1010-12, which is a 12-port solution. Notice the XGS, so that's telling you not only does it provide multi-gig, it also provides 10 gig uplink ports. And we've got a very basic web managed version of both of those here as a 1210-12 and a 1250-12. And then of course on the higher end business side of things, XMG 1930, XS 1930, XGS 2220 series, and the XS 3800 series. So that is it for switches. Now we are on to our security products. I know it's been a while, guys. We're almost done. So something I do want to highlight here is we have been ICSA certified on our security appliances for over 20 years. So ICSA Labs is an independent organization that offers testing and certification of security appliances. So this is not something you will generally find on your low-end security routers. This is something you will usually find on your higher-end stuff, WatchGuard, SonicWall, etc. So we are ICSA certified and have been for over 20 years on our USG Flex and ATP series. So when it comes to security appliances, we traditionally have had three models here. We have our USG Flex series, our traditional UTM security gateways. We have the ATP series, the ATV standing for Advanced Threat Protection. So this provided sandboxing and artificial intelligence and some other new ways of providing security separate from your traditional UTM gateways. And then just this summer, we launched the SCR series, which is sort of our lightweight, license-free UTM solution. It's designed to compete with sort of your lower end, like Ubiquiti, TP-Link type security gateways here. Now, going forward, the ATP series is being phased out. Why are we phasing it out? Because we've added the ATP features to the USG Flex series as an optional license. So now if you want traditional UTM, you buy the USG Flex. If you want that advanced ATP type security, you can just buy the license for your USG Flex and it'll convert itself essentially into an ATP firewall. And then later this month, fingers crossed, we will be launching the USG Flex H series and the HP series. And the main takeaway of the USG-H series is this is a newer, faster hardware platform. So basically, same feature set of the USG Flex, just faster hardware. For those of you that have those really fast WAN connections, these are the models you've been waiting for. Now, when it comes to providing UTM security, most of our competition in the USG space here, again, like the Sonic Walls, Fortinets, etc., generally try to be a jack of all trades. They're being the antivirus company. They're being the content filtering company. They're trying to be the IDP company, et cetera, et cetera. We don't do it that way. Instead of trying to do all of that in-house, our focus is on the hardware and the operating system features. For the UTM and ATP type features, we've partnered with other vendors that are out there that are already experts in that space. So depending on the hardware and the security offering, it could be powered by McAfee, WebRoot, Lastline, Trend Micro, or Bitdefender. So just to touch here on some of the security features really quick that are available with different licensing here. We have the ability to do content filtering, including on SSL encrypted websites. Application Patrol, the ability to create security policies in your firewall based not only just on ports and IP ranges, but on individual application or features of applications. Anti-spam functionality, malware, IDP. We have the ability to do collective detection and response. So different hardware can work together on your network to recognize threats and deal with them. The ability to do sandboxing and artificial intelligence to be able to find and block zero-day exploits, reputation filters, et cetera, et cetera. When it comes to other sort of licenses you can buy on these security gateways, we obviously have Nebula available for you with the Nebula Professional Pack and Plus Pack. Those are options for you. But we also have the ability to do single sign-on, the ability to do secure Wi-Fi, which we'll talk about here in just a second, the ability to add hotspot functionality to your gateway via license, the ability to use your device here as a wireless LAN controller, the ability to convert your device into an SD-WAN device, etc. So these are all things that are options that are available for you on the USG Flex series of products. So one of the things there we had was this, go back to it real quick, maybe. There we go. No. Was this secure Wi-Fi feature. So we've got a slide here on secure Wi-Fi. And basically what it is it gives you another alternative to be able to provide remote access to your corporate network for people who are working from home. rather than needing to configure their network or their PC, or needing to give them a VPN appliance, which may end up double natted behind their existing home gateway that was provided by their ISP. You can turn our access points into what is essentially a centrally managed VPN appliance. So your remote worker, you simply send them one of these access points or they take it home. They plug it into their existing home router. It boots up, it connects to the cloud. It will see it's supposed to be this remote AP device, and it'll automatically start broadcasting a special SSID for your end user to connect to. And once you've connected to that SSID, it's basically a VPN connection back to the main office. So now, in order to use this, obviously you don't want the kids at home connecting to it. You don't want people driving by the house connecting to it. You do have to use 802.1x authentication. So they do have to authenticate using a username and password before they are granted access to that VPN tunnel. And you can also pair that with two-factor authentication for even additional security for you. So one of the things that we often people run into is you've got a lot of customers, you've deployed a lot of security devices out there. How do you handle management of those devices? So with a My Zyxel account, you're able, when you're setting up your customers, you're able to assign them to your My Zyxel account. And then at any point you can log into My Zyxel to get an idea of what's going on when it comes to licensing for your different customers and their networks. It also gives you easy access to Circle, our online tool for buying and applying licenses. And then lastly, we just want to talk about here really quick about the new hardware. So the SCR50AXE. So this is a sort of lightweight UTM appliance router type solution for you. It's got a built-in Wi-Fi 6E access point into it. It can be managed through the Nebula platform for you. It supports auto VPN. It provides secure or subscription-free security UTM type features. So that's there for you, the ability to do multiple SSIDs, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a nice lightweight security solution for smaller offices or maybe even home users or MXU type deployments where you want to manage them with Nebula. And then again, our USG Flex H series should be launching at the end of this month. And basically, it's just a faster version of our existing USG Flex series. And with that, guys, we are done with today's presentation. I don't have any questions in the queue. So if you have some questions, now's the time to send them in using that question and answer interface. Again, use the Q&A interface to type in the questions, and I will read them and respond to you. Do not raise your hands. I cannot enable you to talk. So send those in using question and answer. While we wait, because I did see people raised hands, so hopefully you're typing those in now. Just to let you guys know, most of our webinars are recorded, and those are automatically uploaded to our YouTube channel. So in the North America, our YouTube channel is Zyxel America channel. There's lots of Zyxel channels from our different global regions. So the Zyxel America channel is the US presentations. You will also find some best practices videos. You will find video case studies, et cetera, on our YouTube page. And then if you want to connect to us here with on LinkedIn, we are Zyxel US channel there. And again, while I'm waiting to see if any questions come in, I do want to let you know that we do have user forums, forum.zyxel.com. I highly suggest you check those out. Not only are they a place for you to talk to your other Zyxel installers and users, they are monitored by our headquarters, the product management and support teams. So you will often see them weighing in and answering questions there. But they do monitor it to see, what sort of issues people are having, what sort of features people are looking for. It's also usually the first place where firmware release notes are posted, security bulletins are posted, etc. So it's a good idea to keep an eye on that so you can see what's going on out there and stay on top of things. Okay, I've got a couple questions here for you. So Rodelio, I think I'm reading that right. Setting up remote AP for VPN access doesn't require a license for purchase. So yes, it does. So you will need to have a USG Flex or an ATP series device at your central office, and then you will need to purchase the secure Wi-Fi license to enable that feature to be able to set up APs to work as remote APs. So yes, it is its own license that you can purchase. Heard the SCR line will be expanded. Might we see some multi-gig, 10 gig options made available, perhaps with stronger Wi-Fi antennas? When it comes to Wi-Fi antennas, I believe the SCR is pretty close to the max power you're going to see on that type of device. It's pretty powerful as far as the Wi-Fi goes, I believe. Um, so I don't think you'll see any differences there, but yes, there are going to be new models coming in the future. I believe they will be a little bit more powerful on the hardware side of things, as far as like throughput and stuff. But those will be coming next year at some point. So I don't have any details myself. Your sales guy might know more than I do about what's coming in the future versions, but officially we haven't announced anything. But yes, there will be more models coming next year for you. So Rodelio is asking, do we have a small portable AP that can be carried by remote users? Um, we do have some relatively small APs. If you're looking to use that remote, the secure Wi-Fi feature, take a look at the WAC 500 and the WAC 500H. Both of those, I believe, support secure Wi-Fi, and they're both relatively small. We do not have like any little tiny, portable travel routers that were really popular like 10, 15 years ago. We don't have anything that's super tiny like that. But the WAC 500 and the 500H are both fairly small and don't take up a lot of space. So that could be something that you take with you. They can be powered via a AC adapter to boot them up where you don't have PoE. So those might be options for you. So Sam's saying he believes they were 3 dB. Would like to see 5 dB or 60. I would like to point out that when it comes to the power of your router or your access point, you need to combine the power coming out of the chip through the amps to the antennas and combine them all together in one. Generally, you're going to want more power at the chip or plus amplifier level than you do on the antenna side of things. So the antenna is just going to be amplifying what comes out from there. So increasing the antenna amplification at the antenna level isn't always the best way. You want to look at that total power output that's coming out of those devices. So Sam is also asking what features of the SCR are paywalled, what's its theoretical IPS throughput, and the answer to that is I do not know. Sorry. Um, I am primarily here the wireless guy. I also handle our consumer stuff, some of our Nebula stuff. I am not that familiar personally with the SCR50. So for those two questions, I would suggest you reach out to your salesperson. We've got 3 sales guys, and again, this is our new partner introduction, so I'm assuming you're a partner. So if you're on the western part of the U.S., that you would be dealing with Andy. If you are on the east side of the US, you are dealing with David. And for those of you in the middle, Jacob, they can get you the answer to those questions. I don't know them off the top of my head. Um, so sorry about that. I'll stick around here another minute or two to see if some more questions come in, but I do want to thank everybody that's turned out today. Also, just to let you guys know, we do webinars usually on Tuesdays and Thursdays. As a general rule of thumb, the Tuesday webinars are more technology focused, are more about, where you're going to see more in-depth dives on the hardware itself or on how to configure things. Thursday webinars are generally more high-level overview, salesy type presentations. So we do webinars just about every Tuesday and Thursday during the month. And again, if you've ever missed any of our webinars, most of those are recorded and uploaded to our YouTube page. Rodelio is asking, would you suggest to have a remote AP or to have a software VPN? Any advantage of using remote AP hardware device? So I think it just comes down to what's easier for you to manage. Software VPNs are certainly out there. It's something people are familiar with, but it also is prone to users screwing them up. It also usually requires, that IT get access to the device to set up that VPN connection and configure it properly. And then you got to hope you've locked it down so the user doesn't mess it up. So one of the benefits of using something like the the secure Wi-Fi solution with our access points is that really there is no configuration that needs to be done on the user's device. And especially if you're in a situation where you allow users in general to bring their own device, it's really simple. Any device can connect to that access point, any device can connect to that SSID. They do have to authenticate to verify that they should have access to it, but that's all they have to do. They just have to log in with Wi-Fi, enter their credentials, and they're good to go. So, it just depends on how you've got things set up. In some situations, you may already have the infrastructure in place. You may have complete control over the client devices, so it's easier just to use a software-based VPN. In other cases, it may be easier for you just to, ship out an access point to your remote user who's working, 3 states over, and just have him plug it in and connect to it and not have to worry about configuring the software VPN. Another question here, the entry-level multi-gig switches, the Soho ones, can they not be Nebula managed? It only said Nebula in the higher end ones. So that is correct. Nebula is aimed at the SMB space, so you're not going to find Nebula in anything that we are traditionally aiming at the home market or the Soho space. So when it comes to switches, it's going to have to be anything 1915 series and higher for Nebula management. And when it comes to multi-gig, I think 1930 series is going to be the lowest end multi-gig professional switches that provide Nebula management. And I'll stick around here for another minute to see if you're working on another question. Here we go. Do multiple users only use one license on the remote AP? And I believe the answer for that is yes. So the license, as I understand it, again, this isn't my main area of focus at the company, but my understanding is the secure Wi-Fi license is basically a per AP license, not a per user license. So it's going to unlock X number of access points that can be secure, that can use secure Wi-Fi. And so once you're at home, if your user has a phone and say a laptop, both of which he may want to get on there, they are going to be able to with just that one license. Sam's asking here, can I elaborate on what the MSP pack does? Sure. So we do have a dedicated sort of Nebula overview, so you might want to join that when we have it or pull it up on our YouTube channel from the last one. But yeah, I'll try to hit on it here for you. So the MSP license for Nebula is assigned to your admin account. And only that admin account that has the license has access to these features. So if you have multiple admin accounts that you want to have access to these features, each one of them has to have the MSP license. In general, most of our customers just have one sort of master admin account for these features. Even if you have multiple admins, generally only one or two guys actually need access to the extra features. But it's designed for MSP, so it gives you what we call the MSP page. And it will basically show you all of your customers and give you sort of a snapshot view of what's going on their networks before you dive deeper into those customers for doing any sort of configuration. But it'll quickly show you who's using the free version of Nebula, who's using paid, whether licenses are coming up for expiration, whether licenses have recently expired, how many sites each customer has. So that's part of the MSP view. It also allows you to remove the Zyxel branding inside the Nebula interface and basically replace our logo with your logo, replace our support contact information with your support contact information. So if you're allowing your users access into Nebula to keep an eye on things, or maybe to provide limited management functionality, you can rebrand that interface that they see when they log in with your company's information. One of the nicer features it does is it allows you to get email alerts and reports from all of your all your sites, even the free ones that are managed just with the free version of Nebula. So that's a feature that's not normally included with the free Nebula, but if you have the MSP license, even your free accounts will have access to that functionality through the MSP license. It also allows you to set up teams of your admin users. So generally with Nebula, you add a new customer in there. You have to add which of your admin accounts you want to have access to it. If somebody new joins, you have to add them in for each site you want them to have access to. If somebody quits, you have to remove them from each individual customer. So with teams, you can just set up different types of teams and then just add or remove users to the team, and then it'll apply to all of the sites that those teams are assigned to. So a little bit easier management there. So those are the main differences that you get with the MSP pack in Nebula. So Rodelio is asking, you mentioned that you're getting rid of the ATP firewall and stick with the USG Flex. Would there be any downgrade or upgrade promo to the USG Flex? I understand the ATP or higher model. So the ATP series are being phased out for the USG Flex. And you can reach out to your sales guys. They can sort of tell you which USG Flex is the most similar to the certain ATP model. But basically the feature set's going to be the same going to the USG Flex. It's basically the same hardware. It just had different licenses on it or different software on it. So that's all just being consolidated into the USG Flex series. So there is no sort of trade in your ATP for a USG Flex. There's no reason to do that. If you already have an ATP, you are good to go. We do generally have various trade-in promotions going on. So that's something you can talk to your salesperson about to see if the existing hardware you have, if you're looking to trade in something that you've already got at a customer site and replace it with some new Zyxel stuff, we usually can give you some discounts through that trade-in program. I don't know all the details of which specific models qualify, but it's something to ask your salesperson about. Um, as far as that goes. From a performance standpoint, I believe most of the performance difference between the ATP and the USG Flex just had to do with the type of UTM they were offering. The traditional UPM was more CPU intensive, where the ATP series, since a lot of the work is being done in the cloud, were offered better performance on the same basic hardware, just because of it being less demanding on the CPU. But for higher performance stuff, we will have that H series hopefully launching at the end of this year. And that's going to be significantly faster than anything we've currently got now in the USG Flex or ATP series. So I hope that answered your question. Okay, I am not seeing any other questions coming in, so I'm going to go ahead and end today's webinar. If you do have some more questions, you can either email me directly or just reach out to your salesperson with them, and they should be able to provide answers for you. I thank you for turning out today. I hope you found at least some of this beneficial for you and hope to see you at one of our future webinars.